And I think we are live. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode. I got my friend Jimmy Song on board. We did an episode a couple of weeks ago talking about, crypto stuff, but I got him on the show quickly. We're going to have a really quick, short episode, about 15, 20 minutes. And we're going to be talking about none other than the Bitcoin Cash and what's been going on in the whole Bitcoin and cryptoverse. So I'm kind of going to leave it over to Jimmy. And Jimmy, why don't you kind of fill us in on exactly what the hell's going on?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Amir, thanks for having me on. Yeah. So Bitcoin Cash is a hard fork of Bitcoin. It's almost like a separate currency. Many people are calling it an altcoin. I'm sure your viewers are familiar with the many different altcoins that are around, and really, that's kind of how they've marketed themselves. It's a lot like Bitcoin, except there's sort of what you would call an airdrop of or a distribution of funds that's based on the Bitcoin ledger as of 12/20 UTC August 1st. So if you had Bitcoin before August 1st, 12/20 UTC, then you have the equivalent amount in Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So for a lot of people, it kind of looks like free money, but it's there's sort of economic consequences, and a lot of players that have had to, like me, that have had to pay for the fact that this is a hard fork, and have had to do that. But basically, if you had 10 Bitcoin before August 1st, you had 10 Bitcoin still and 10 Bitcoin Cash tokens. So there's been a lot of consequences to this, and I've been following it pretty closely. You can check out my Twitter feed and my Medium posts to catch up if you'd like. But yeah, it's an altcoin that's basically split off from Bitcoin. It has 8 megabyte blocks. It doesn't have SegWit. It doesn't have replace by fee. It has a different difficulty adjustment algorithm. These are all technical details that you can find out more about. But essentially, they're a hard fork of Bitcoin.
What was the main reasons why it forked?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the SegWit activation window, there was a lot of controversy around SegWit and just Bitcoin scaling in general. And what happened was after the New York agreement, there was something called BIP 91, which would sort of force everyone to signal SegWit and bring SegWit to the Bitcoin network. But before that, there was something called user-activated soft fork, which BIP 91 front ran. Anyway, that's all sort of a long story. But basically, because of user-activated soft fork, there were a bunch of miners that decided to make sort of a response to BIP 148, which is user-activated soft fork. And this was called the user-activated hard fork by the miners. And this was thought to be sort of a response in case user-activated soft fork gain traction. What ended up happening was that because of BIP 91, SegWit was going to be on the network, so people thought, hey, you know what? This isn't going to go anywhere. There isn't going to be a user-activated hard fork, as called by the miners. But some people really didn't like SegWit and sort of morphed that project into a project where they would have big blocks and no SegWit. And that's kind of what happened. There's enough people behind this movement, especially with the support of VIA BTC, which controls roughly 5% of the network hash power, that it's become its own coin as of August 1st.
So what has been so far I want to say consequences, but the repercussions of this hard fork with Bitcoin itself?
Yeah, so I mean, it's had a lot of repercussions for exchanges, for example, and payment processors. Most of them just shut down for a day or two based on what was happening. I work at an exchange. I work for ItBit, and that's something that we've definitely had to do. So I like to kind of call it like socialized cost for launching an altcoin, and it kind of is, because everybody that's running Bitcoin needs to now split the coins, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and like figure out what to do with Bitcoin Cash. If you're an exchange, you have to make sure that your customers are made whole, and they get the Bitcoin Cash that they're entitled to. But you obviously need to build out the infrastructure to do that. Other consequences are payment processors. They just stopped accepting things for a few hours on August 1st. Others are I think Coinbase, Bitfinex, a lot of these exchanges are were facing lawsuits at one point, and they decided, okay, well, let's do things this other way so that we're making our customers whole. We expected that if Bitcoin Cash are popular, that the hash rate of Bitcoin would go down a little bit. That would mean that blocks would be slightly longer than 10 minutes. I don't think that's the case because it looks like enough mining power has come online that sort of 10-minute blocks continue to be the case on Bitcoin. But yeah, obviously there's a whole market now for Bitcoin Cash, and it's been sort of pretty volatile the first week. But yeah, that's obviously opened up a lot of cold wallets, basically, of people that want to just sell their Bitcoin Cash and get more Bitcoin or something like that. There are other people that are just sort of buying up Bitcoin Cash at sort of lower prices than they could get Bitcoin. So a tremendous amount of consequences all over the ecosystem, and it's not really something you can ignore and hope goes away.
Where do you see the future of Bitcoin Cash, or what can you hypothesize yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't really know because it really depends on price. Price will dictate a lot of things.
Or let me ask you this. Let me switch the question over. What is the utility of it?
Right. The main utility that they are, purporting is bigger blocks. So it has 8 megabyte blocks. So you can have a lot more transactions per block than Bitcoin does. And they did mine a couple of 4 megabyte blocks. So, I guess that's to their point. And no SegWit. They think it's too complicated and they don't want it. And there's no replace by fee as well, which they felt like was, if your viewers don't know what replace by fee is, if you send a transaction with too low of a fee, say you sent the transaction with like 20 cents, and it keeps not going into a block, what replace by fee does is you can replace that transaction with a higher fee. So say like $1 or something, and the other transaction will sort of come out of the mempool. They took that out. So if you send a transaction with too low a fee on Bitcoin Cash and it keeps not getting into a block, you just have to sort of wait 72 hours for it to come out of the mempool and try sending again. But yeah, those are the main sort of technical things that they're claiming. But I mean, let's face it, it's mostly like Bitcoin except for a few differences, at least right now, because SegWit isn't activated on Bitcoin yet. But yeah, that's their main value proposition, is that it has bigger blocks. Whether or not that's found to be useful by the community is something only the market can decide.
Now, for Bitcoin, they still have, is the 2x still going on? Is that going forward? SegWit 2x?
It looks like it. I mean, there's some speculation that there are people that that wanted big blocks would just move over to Bitcoin Cash, but that's really hard to know because Bitcoin, the 2x part of Bitcoin 2x looks like it's scheduled for somewhere around November 20th or something like that. And that's, first of all, pretty far away in Bitcoin terms. That's like 3 years in Bitcoin, right? Like, and the other reason is because we don't know how Bitcoin Cash will do. And we don't really even know whether like Bitcoin Cash doing well bodes well for the 2x or not. Because, there are arguments on both sides. If it does well, then the 2x people might be like, hey, it's doing well, therefore we should increase it too. But for the other side, they'd be like, well, you already have your big blocks, go to the other chain. But if it doesn't do well, then the argument might be, well, we shouldn't do it because, there's clearly no market for it. Or, the other argument might be, well, we should do it because, otherwise there's going to be a hard fork and all this mess again. I mean, there's so many arguments. It's hard to know even like whether or not this will be good or bad for it. We just have to watch the markets pretty closely and where the prices end up.
Have you seen anything that was kind of a surprise to you that wasn't unexpected?
Well, the whole fork was unexpected for me. I actually thought that this would just sort of go away because of bid 91 was sort of agreed to. Everyone thought it was a good way to go about it. So like this, when it happened, I think it was like not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. It was a huge shocker to me, and I was out like with my family and stuff, and when I saw the news, I didn't really believe it. And when I got back, I knew this was something that I really needed to study and understand. And the post that I put up there was like by far the most popular post I've ever had on my Medium blog. So I mean, that kind of tells you like how much of an impact this has had in the ecosystem.
Do you fear any issues with like branding? For example, if people are typing in Bitcoin and like newbies coming into the space, like, okay, you got Bitcoin, then you got Bitcoin Cash. Like, what the fuck's what?
Yeah. I do worry about that, and that's something I wrote in an article a while back. Why Bitcoin divorce will be very painful. That said, I mean, yeah, I do worry about that a little bit, but for the most part, I think the people that launch Bitcoin Cash aren't pretending that this is Bitcoin, right? Like they're pretty clearly stating, hey, this is a fork and we are the fork and we're not Bitcoin. We're not Bitcoin Core or whatever. So in that way, I appreciate that because they are sort of separating themselves. There are some people on Twitter that are complaining about the fact that the name Bitcoin is in the name of their coin, Bitcoin Cash. I don't care too much about that. I think people are smart enough to figure out which one's which. They just have to, I mean, there's nobody on like Bitcoin.com that's saying this is the real Bitcoin, though. You never know, like what people might say soon enough. But yeah, for now, at least, it seems like they're fairly clear on the fact that they are the hard fork. And in many ways, they are an altcoin with an airdrop. And that's okay. That's been done before. It's just, I don't like the socialized cost of launching the coin. That's like sort of being given to developers like me. But, I mean, what can you do? They did what they did.
Do you think, or let me ask you this question, actually. I was actually, for what has happened and for all the chaos that ensued, I was actually quite surprised that Bitcoin held its value that high.
Yeah, that's been kind of a surprise to me too. You would think that if there was a split, and it was sort of priced into the price of Bitcoin, that the sum of the two resulting coins would be roughly what was before, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The sum is something like over 3,000. So in a way, I guess we've gone over 3,000 as a Bitcoin, but I don't know if that's how you would count it. But yeah, it didn't seem to have gotten priced in. I'm not really sure why. People do see, I mean, this happens with any sort of altcoin launch, is that value is kind of created out of thin air almost. So I don't know how long that can go on, but that seems to be what happened here.
Did you hear about you just mentioned earlier, but Coinbase had to retract their statements before?
Yeah. I don't think they handled this very well. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame them because I understand that, as an exchange, it's very, very difficult to, list a new asset because you got to get all the wallets and all these procedures in place for deposits and withdrawals. You got to make sure it doesn't have like malware or anything. You got to like sort of go over the code and stuff like that. And it's not easy to launch a coin. And we pretty much every exchange had something like, 7 to 10 days to prepare. And that's not nearly enough time. No. And Coinbase, I think, said when they put out their statement, it was kind of like, hey, you know what? We're just going to ignore it. And then they were going to face some lawsuits and legal liability. And I think some of the smarter lawyers on their staff said, hey, we should really make our customers whole. And then they decided to put out another statement. And pretty much every other exchange has done that, right? Like Gemini, us, and others, we're going to make sure that the customers get what they're entitled to. We're not going to take on this legal liability. And that's kind of the smart thing to do from a legal perspective. You have to do your fiduciary duty of holding your customers' Bitcoin. So yeah, it's kind of been chaos for the entire industry, and I mean, it kind of sucks for a lot of the developers because they have to deal with this thing that sort of came up. But yeah, it's not fun.
But even though we're going through this, let's say, interesting period. Don't you think in the long run this might actually be better, since let's say that camp got what they want and we're finally now getting SegWit and everyone can split their ways? Like, this is what we want, that's what you want, you do your thing, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if it was the only split, then maybe it's worth it. And you have maybe two coins with different sort of use cases, one for microtransactions and another for more like a bottom layer of a multi-layer system. But yeah, I mean, like, given how this has gone, I think it's entirely possible that more forks like this are coming if Bitcoin Cash continues to hold its value, in which case it's going to suck for developers like me. But then maybe it's good because we have procedures for dealing with this sort of thing, and we can codify it and not have to panic every time like 10 days before when something is announced.
Well, we also have to talk about, for example, with Bitcoin, you have a massive amount of developers working on solutions. Like Bitcoin Cash, like who are the developers?
Well, there's two, as far as I can tell, F-Trader and DataLinks. And I don't know the reputations of either of them. It looks like DataLinks used to work on Bitcoin Unlimited or something like that. But yeah, I mean, you need more than two eyes looking at it. Is my view. I mean, like it's hard enough as like a developer to think of all the adversarial cases of like, you know, ways in which people will try to attack what you just coded. If you only have two developers, you really need a wider perspective so you can just know ways in which your stuff can break. And I'm not sure that they had that. And maybe, I mean, to be fair, they might have more people coming in to review their code. And this is just the Bitcoin ABC client. I've heard that there are other clients like Bitcoin Unlimited Cash and Bitcoin Classic and a bunch of others. But in general, like anything with security, the more eyes that look at it, the better. And you know, that's something for them to worry about, frankly. And you know, I'm not going to pass too much judgment on them because, as far as I know, a lot of altcoins operate similarly. So there you go.
Cool. So I know some people have a question, as in for the SegWit 2x, what does SegWit give once it's activated? What is the promise?
Okay, so if you think of sort of Bitcoin transactions like in the real world, like as like checks, right? Like it's like writing a check. If I give you, Amir, like $10, what the bank does is they don't take like a physical $10 bill from like a bin that represents me and put it into yours. They just have a ledger, right? Minus 10 Jimmy, plus 10 Amir. And you could sort of think of Bitcoin transactions in the same way, right? Like you have a transaction, you have to sign it, and then if the signature is valid, then it goes on the network. If you think of SegWit, for whatever reason, like when you know, a physical check, it's like a small corner that contains your signature. A digital check or a digital transaction, the signature takes up about half. And what SegWit does is it sort of like moves the half that's the signature and sort of you can fit more checks in a box, if you will, right? And it fixes a lot of other things, but it allows things like Lightning. But that's essentially what the promise is. There's sort of like another layer that's coming on top of Bitcoin that we'll be able to utilize as a result of SegWit, including Lightning Network and a bunch of other things. You know, I think eventually we're looking at Schnorr signatures for more efficiency and scale and things like that. But yeah, essentially we have you know, a promise of another layer that's coming as a result of SegWit that we can utilize instead of, you know, just doing everything on chain.
And so with SegWit, the micropayments is a possibility.
Yeah. You can if once you have Lightning Network, micropayments are very much a possibility. Now, I mean, not to say that it's perfect. There's a lot of concerns around Lightning Network that still have to be proven. But you know, it's something that we can try, and there's a lot of other ideas as well.
Very cool. I think we'll wrap it up over there. Like I said, I want to keep this super short and simple. We're like 15 minutes right in. Just want to give a quick overview on Bitcoin Cash and all the mayhem that's been going on. If people want to find out more about you and the writings that you do, best resource?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Medium, and GitHub at Jimmy Song, and yeah, just look me up and, you know, go take a look at you know, the articles that I've written, the tweets that I've done, and yeah, you can keep up to date there.
Guys, I highly recommend you go check out Jimmy's Medium articles. There's a link below this video. That's how I keep up to date. Like his Medium, like I don't know if you sleep, bro. Like it's like every couple of days a fucking article comes out. Ridiculous.
I have been pretty obsessed with this stuff. Yeah.
Well, we need somebody to be. So I'm glad it's you.
Thank you.
Awesome, Jimmy. Well, I'll talk to you soon, brother. Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.